Good morning. Well, at least it's morning for me. So this is the lecture on cover letters and resumes, and so I want to get right into the examples which the previous assignment asked you to analyze. So you might remember that the large majority of those came from Red River Community Corps, and it's a nonprofit that I was a part of for several years. I recently dropped off the board, but it's the organization which allocates AmeriCorps federal grant funding and actually funds those positions in Oklahoma City and across the state. So they apply for $1 million federal grant, and that money is sent to Red River Community Corps, and it regulates who gets the funds. And usually it's nonprofits who get someone to work for them for a year, and this is how the AmeriCorps program typically works. So I got to be on the hiring committee for the most recent executive director there. So we got a wide variety of resumes when we posted that listing. I mean, everything from, super religious guy who has all these degrees and talks about his family in the resume, hope you enjoyed that one, to, very serious leader, entrepreneur with experience in grants, experience in federal funding, and with evidence to back it up. So you get a whole variety when you send out this mass job posting, especially if it's on Indeed.com or somewhere like that. And you're probably going to think I'm advertising for them, but it's the big one. You see people sending out the same application to 100 different jobs. My opinion, that's a terrible way to get a job. Might seem like it's going to work, but you're probably going to get cut from almost all of those, unless no one else is applying, because you haven't adapted it. So you have to adapt the cover letter and resume. That's what gets you an in. I've also been on 2 professor hiring committees here at OC, and that is a very different style of cover letter and resume. Academics usually use what's known as a curriculum vitae, or a CV, and if you are planning on doing one of those for this project, I encourage you to look up examples or email me so I can send you my example, and you can kind of see how the format works a lot differently from the typical resume. But we often see things like classes taught, what degree did you get, what degrees, what institution did they come from, where have you taught, are you in a specialty field or a general field, are you a good fit? And ultimately, getting a job comes down to being a good fit. And so sometimes we think about qualifications, and I've got to meet all these qualifications, and that's true, but if you fit the requirements for the job, you may not even need the qualifications. And let me give you an example of that, which is occasionally you'll have someone in academics who has worked in the field a long time, who's been a businessman for a long time, but also has an upper level degree. Well, maybe they haven't taught for 20 years, but they have that real world experience that they want to bring in. So sometimes that kind of qualification can be even more important than having done research or something like that. Another committee that I've been on here at OC was the coffee shop manager search committee for the brew. And so for that one, we had a large committee. I think there were 9 of us. And we had the head of HR kind of running it for us and managing. And we had 3 criteria that had to be met for that job. They were pastoral care. So the manager had to be able to interact with students and faculty and staff and care for them, have a way to mentor them. They also had to be a good budget manager, because there's a budget associated with that, and you have to be able to do math, right, and keep the tables balanced. And then they also had to know about coffee. And I think one of the first questions they were asked was, well, what drink did you have this morning? Just to see, are you immersed in that culture? And for that one, we interviewed about half of the candidates in person, and the interviews told a lot. So, the cover letter and resume got them in the door. Were they qualified? Were they a good fit? But then the interview really set them apart. And let me just give you one negative example. Was that one of the candidates had just had this rough breakup with a church. The eldership had been deceptive, and he had been burned, and it was all over. That's almost all he talked about in that interview. And it was very clear that he wasn't ready for this job, even though otherwise he was qualified. So you want to be very careful about how you present yourself, and that kind of presentation does carry over into the written words that you put in the cover letter and resume. So you might think also in those about the minimum qualifications. Okay, what do you have to just get an interview, right? are you meeting their basic requirements? And usually on the job listing, it's very clear. You must have this degree, or you must have worked this many years in this kind of field. And so if you have those things, chances are you will get at least an interview, or you'll move on to the second round of decision making. But then on the other hand, you want to think about, well, what are the maximum qualifications? And does the employer want someone with maximum qualifications? Because they don't always. Usually if you have higher qualifications, they have to pay you more. For example, at OC, if you're adjuncting, we pay more for someone with a PhD than with a master's. And now we want someone who's more qualified, but some places they may say, they have way too much experience. And I'm not trying not to use the word overqualified, but in the sense of the employer is not wanting to spend as much on this particular position, and therefore qualifications are a liability for the employer rather than an advantage for you. A huge problem in cover letters and resumes, and this cannot be emphasized enough, especially in ones that I get as the assignment, is not backing up qualifications and claims. So if you make a claim that you're a good communicator, there better be evidence for that. Yes, I went to Honduras and led a team there, and there was a hurricane while we were there, and I pulled them out of the storm and communicated to everybody to get on the lifeboats. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but you get the idea, right? You need to have some kind of evidence that is proof that you can do what you say you do. If you don't, it's something anyone can say, it's fluff, it's going to be ignored. In fact, it's going to actually make you look worse than it would otherwise. Another thing you can do that will make you even more of a qualified candidate is to do your homework. So mention something about the company that most people wouldn't know, right? That shows that you've looked at it. Why wouldn't you do that? The cover letter and resume is the time when you have all this time beforehand to make sure you're on the right track, to do your homework, to make sure every word is correct. Why not spend a few extra hours perfecting the cover letter and resume, doing your homework? And then when you get to the interview, they might remember, oh yeah, you knew this, or oh yeah, your resume was one of the most beautiful ones we've ever seen. That is easy to do. What's hard to do is to have maybe that engaging personality, or to show yourself your best strengths in the moment, or to be prepared for that unusual question. Those are hard things. To do well on the cover letter and resume is not hard. Okay, so just thinking through, again, the qualifications. There are quantifiable qualifications, right? So what degrees do you hold? And if your degree, if you don't have your undergraduate yet, you can put forthcoming and then the year, right? Or anticipated. Let's talk about GPA. I think you should put your GPA on there unless it's really low. If you don't put your GPA on the resume, I think people are going to wonder why, right? And, oh, how bad is it, right? Gosh, is it a 1 point something? Is it a 2 point something? And you might have a, 2.9, and they're just going to assume that it's really bad because you didn't put it on there. I know there are rules about this. To me, there aren't any rules for cover letters and resumes. There aren't any rules. It depends completely upon audience and context. Who is reading your resume? What company are you applying to? What's the situation? They may really care about, having a high GPA, or they may not care about it at all, and you want to think through what's most likely and adapt accordingly. Other qualifications, foreign languages, always makes you look good. Definitely put it on there. One-for-one matching of job criteria, so they've got a list of things that you need to have. You better list those one for one. If they say has managed small groups in high-stress situations, then you say, I managed a small group in a high-stress situation when I went to Honduras and there was a hurricane and people were dying. Okay. You get the idea. Now, an exception to the qualification section is that some qualifications are made to make the company appear better. So if they say, they want to have a diverse workforce, or they would love someone who has, traveled abroad, something that they think is going to make them look better, it may not be a qualification. It may be just something that they're hoping you have. And so don't feel like those are necessarily going to cut you in or out. And then you want to be a good fit for the job, as I mentioned earlier, but this is more than just qualifications. It also applies culturally, geographically. So are you an Oklahoman and applying for an Oklahoman job? That may be an advantage. People might think you have connections around here, right? Are you part of that professional in-group? Can you talk the talk? And I would throw in a few technical terms that show that you are, because you don't want to risk them thinking, they didn't mention anything about this, so I guess there's no way that they're really an insider. They would have mentioned it. You don't want people thinking about that. You also want to think about diversity. Employers are looking for a diverse race, class, gender, age, sexual orientation, etc. If you are diverse in one aspect, can you play that up? Or do you want to be more pragmatic and you don't want to risk emphasizing that element? You have to watch out because prejudice can seep through. And so I don't think it's a moral thing whether you emphasize your diversity, your diverse identity or not. I think it's a practical thing. So if you're worried that you're not going to be hired because people are going to stereotype you, then maybe don't play up those stereotypes, right? And again, if you think that's a moral issue, that's certainly your own decision, but to me it's not. It's a practical decision. It's adapting to your audience. This is something we all do all the time. Finally, spelling and grammar. It's weighted high in this assignment. It needs to be perfect, okay? This is not the case where you write an email and a few mistakes might be glossed over. No, spelling and grammar need to be perfect. Maybe the employer doesn't care and lets you get away with a few. Maybe the employer is like, hey, to the administrative assistant, why don't you look through all these? If there's any spelling or grammar mistakes, throw them in the trash. If there's too many resumes, sometimes it's an easy way to cut. It shows that you haven't really cared about doing the work for this assignment. All right, I'm really excited about reading your cover letters and resumes. I hope that you will put a lot of time into them, and I hope that this will be real practical for you and that you'll actually get jobs in your field based on this assignment. And now, maybe you've done this assignment before already for various reasons. That's fine. I've got a few different requirements I think that'll help give you another shot at it. A couple resources. So Indeed.com, right, great place to go. OC has job listings. And then if you are interested in nonprofits, especially based on the recommendation report assignment, go to the Oklahoma Center for Nonprofits. If you just Google it, you'll find it. They have a menu item called job listings, and just browse around there. I think you'll find some jobs that are really interesting. Might be a great place for you to get started. All right, that's the end of this lecture. Thanks for listening.